In 1907, a Pennsylvania railroad engineer tied down his safety valve to get a coal drag over the mountain at Altoona. Caught, he would have been fired on the spot. He did it anyway, and the train made the hill. Number 11 on this list killed men who did it wrong. Number 3 was so common, the Rulebook was eventually rewritten around it. These 25 banned shortcuts kept America's trains running for 100 years. Hit that subscribe button and let us count them down. Number 25. The Dutch drop. Every rulebook in America banned this move, and every yard crew in America knew how to do it. Picture a locomotive pulling one car, needing to get that car behind the engine without a runaround track. The engineer accelerated hard, the brakeman pulled the pin on the fly, the engine sprinted through the switchman threw the points back the instant it cleared, and the coasting car rolled onto the other route, gliding past the engine that had just been pulling it. Timed right, it saved 30 minutes of switching. Timed wrong, a free-rolling boxcar met a standing locomotive at 15 miles an hour. Railroads called it a flying switch and threatened dismissal for it in rule after rule from the 1880s onward. Old heads taught it to new brakemen anyway, because a local freight with 14 stops did not have 30 spare minutes at any of them. Number 24. Kicking cars. The rulebook said every car movement had to be coupled and controlled. The yard said otherwise. Kicking meant shoving a cut of cars, pulling the pin, and letting the loose car roll free to couple itself onto a standing string, nothing controlling it but gravity and a prayer. A good switch crew could kick 40 cars into a dozen different tracks in an hour, a pace that no by-the-book crew could touch. Foremen judged the speed by ear. The coupling should sound like a handshake, not a collision. Company officials wrote letters about damage claims every single year, and every single year the yards kept kicking, because the freight had to be classified by morning, and there was only one way to do it that fast. Number 23. Polling. Look at photographs of freight cars built before 1920, and you will see a small cup-shaped pocket cast into each corner. That pocket existed for one of the most quietly dangerous practices on the railroad. When a car sat on a track the engine could not reach, crews wedged a hardwood pole, 8 feet long and thick as a fence post, between the pocket on the locomotive and the pocket on the car, and shoved the car down the parallel track. A brakeman held the pole in place with his hands, while several hundred tons of locomotive pushed against it. If the pole slipped or shattered, and oak under that load could explode like a rifle shot, the man holding it caught the pieces. Railroads restricted it, then banned it, then kept casting polling pockets into new equipment anyway. It saved an hour of switching. It cost some men their lives. The pockets did not vanish from car designs until the practice finally died in the 1930s. Number 22. Doping a hot box on the run. Before roller bearings, every car rode on friction bearings, a brass block sitting on a bare axle in a box packed with oil-soaked cotton waste. When the oil ran dry, a hot box could burn the axle clean through and put a train on the ground. The rulebook said set the car out at the next siding. The old heads had a faster answer. At a water stop, a brakeman ran to the smoking box with a bucket, flipped the lid, and doped it. Fresh oil, new waste, and the unofficial ingredients that never appeared in any manual. Shaved soap to slow the leak, a little water to cool the brass. Some men swore by sulfur, others by heavy valve oil stolen from the engine. Then the train ran on, with the conductor watching that car from the cupola for the next 100 miles, smelling the air for hot metal. Setting out a car could cost 2 hours and a missed connection. A dope job cost 5 minutes. The companies knew. The companies said nothing, as long as nothing derailed. Number 21. Bran in the boiler. A steam locomotive with a leaking flue was supposed to come out of service, and a shop repair could take days. Firemen had a solution that horrified every mechanical officer who ever heard of it and worked anyway. A few handfuls of dry bran, oatmeal, or ground horse feed dumped into the tender water. The particles circulated through the boiler, found the leak, got carried into the crack by the escaping water, swelled with the heat and moisture, and sealed the flue from the inside like a scab. Roundhouse foreman kept a sack of it hidden behind the sand dryer and denied its existence to visiting inspectors. The fix could hold for weeks. Master mechanics wrote furious bulletins about foreign matter plugging injectors, and they were right. But when the engine assigned to the morning local was leaking at 4 a.m. and there was no spare power on the division, the oatmeal went in, the engine went out, and the passengers never knew their train was running on breakfast cereal. Number 20. The chain drawbar. When a coupler broke out on the road and cast steel in a Dakota winter broke like glass, the rulebook said, "Chain the car, run to the next terminal at restricted speed, and set it out." The old heads read that rule loosely. A heavy chain from the caboose, looped through what was left of the draft gear, pulled snug by easing the slack out 1 inch at a time, and the train kept moving, sometimes the rest of the way across the division at track speed, with a chain doing the work of a coupler in the middle of a mile of freight. The trick was in the engineer's hands after that. Every brake application feathered like he was carrying eggs, because a snapped chain on a grade meant the rear half of the train was suddenly its own train. Conductors marked the car in the wheel report and quietly failed to mention how fast they had run with it. It was banned in practice, tolerated in reality, and it kept freight schedules alive through every hard winter on the northern roads. Number 19. Running on smoke. Before radio, before track warrants, a meet between two trains on single track was arranged by paper orders, and a crew that doubted the paperwork had exactly one unofficial instrument left: the horizon. Old engineers read smoke the way sailors read weather. A standing column of black at the far end of the valley meant the opposing train was in the siding, waiting. A moving smudge along the tree line meant she was out on the main and coming. Some crews trusted the smoke enough to leave a meeting point early, stealing 10 minutes on a schedule that had no minutes to spare, a violation that could put two trains on the same track facing each other. Officially, no railroad ever sanctioned running on smoke. Unofficially, division superintendents who had come up from the right-hand seat knew precisely how their fastest crews stayed fast, because they had done it themselves, in the same valleys, reading the same smoke. First pattern break. Here is what you have to understand about the old rulebook. Railroad men said the book of rules was written in blood, and that was true. Every rule traced back to a wreck and a funeral. But the men who worked under that book knew something the men who wrote it would not admit. If every crew on the railroad followed every rule exactly as written, the railroad would grind to a stop in a week. The schedules were built on the assumption that men would cut corners. The tonnage ratings assumed it. The switching allowances assumed it. Officials posted the rules in the depot, then promoted the crews who quietly broke them. Every old head learned it in his first month. There was the railroad in the book, and there was the railroad on the ground, and your job was to know exactly how far apart they were on any given day. Number 18. Tying down the pop valve. The safety valve was the one device standing between a working boiler and a boiler explosion, set to lift and vent steam at the legal limit. On a mountain grade with a heavy train, some engineers wanted more than the legal limit. A wired down or screwed down pop valve let the pressure climb 10, 15, 20 pounds past the setting, and every extra pound was extra power on the hill. It was the most notorious cheat in the steam era, banned by every railroad, whispered about in every roundhouse. The men who did it picked their moments: one hard grade, one heavy drag, wire cutters ready to undo the evidence before the terminal. Boiler inspectors checked seals and settings precisely because they knew. The honest truth is that this shortcut killed people, and every crew knew a story with names in it. It stays on this list because it stayed in use anyway, decade after decade, whenever tonnage met a mountain and a man decided the schedule was worth the gamble. Number 17. The Brake Club. Before air brakes and long after them in the yards, cars were held by handbrakes, a wheel on a vertical staff that a man tightened by muscle. Except no man's bare hands could tighten one enough to hold a loaded car on a grade. So every brakeman carried a brake club, a hickory stick about 18 inches long, jammed between the spokes of the brake wheel and used as a lever to wind the chain drum tighter than the equipment was ever designed to take. Railroads banned clubs repeatedly because over-tightened brakes bent staffs, snapped chains, and flattened wheels, and because a club that slipped sent a man backwards off a car roof. The brakemen ignored the ban with total unanimity because the alternative was a string of cars rolling away down the yard lead. A new man without a club was not considered rule-abiding. He was considered useless. Some men carved their initials into the hickory and carried the same club for 20 years, an illegal tool issued by nobody, required by everybody. Number 16. Bleeding the air. An air-braked car cut away from its train holds its brakes on, which is exactly what you want on the road, and exactly what you do not want in a yard where cars have to roll free to be sorted. The approved procedure for releasing them involved time nobody had. The real procedure was a switchman walking a cut of 20 cars at a fast trot, pulling the bleed rod on each one as he passed, venting the reservoirs in a long hissing chorus, so the whole cut would roll the moment the engine shoved. Done carelessly, it meant cars standing on a grade held by nothing but a couple of handbrakes and optimism. More than one runaway that made the newspapers started as a bled cut that got away, and after each one came a bulletin, and after each bulletin came the next shift, bleeding cars at a fast trot because the hump did not wait. Number 15. Waste fires under frozen switches. A switch packed with ice will not throw, and a yard full of frozen switches in a January storm is a yard that has stopped moving. The company answer was men with brooms and picks, and later switch heaters. The immediate answer, on every northern railroad from Maine to Montana, was fire. A wad of oil-soaked cotton waste from the journal boxes, stuffed between the rails, lit with a fusee, burning greasy and orange under the switch points until the ice let go. It violated fire rules, safety rules, and in most towns a city ordinance or two. On a bad night, a big yard glowed with dozens of little illegal fires, switchmen moving from flame to flame like men tending campfires. Old-timers kept a coffee can of waste and a bottle of journal oil stashed in the shanty for exactly this, all of it against the rules. All of it the only reason the 2 a.m. transfer got out of town. Number 14. The torch on the air hoses. Cold was the enemy of air brakes. Moisture in the train line froze, hoses stiffened like iron pipe, and a train that could not pump up its air was a train that legally could not move an inch. The rulebook answer was to wait for the car department. The road answer was an open flame. A kerosene torch, a fusee, sometimes a handful of burning waste, run slowly along the frozen hose and fittings until the ice cracked loose and the gauge started to climb. Every bulletin ever printed forbade open flame near air hoses and the oil-soaked underside of a freight car. And every crew north of the Ohio River did it anyway from November to March. The trick was patience. Warm it. Do not cook it, because a burned hose put you in a worse hole than a frozen one. Conductors carried extra fusees in winter for this purpose and wrote them off as flagging supplies. The paperwork was fiction. The train departed. Second pattern break. Here is the part the official histories skip. The companies knew. All of it. The superintendent who posted the bulletin banning flying switches had made 1,000 of them as a young brakeman. The master mechanic who raged about oatmeal in the boilers had carried a sack of it on his own engine in 1889. Railroad discipline ran on demerits, and the unwritten rule of the demerit system was simple. Men were not punished for how the work got done. They were punished for outcomes. Break every rule in the book and bring the train in on time, and you were a railroader. Break one rule and put a car on the ground, and suddenly the book was read aloud at your investigation, line by line, as though anyone had ever followed it. The old heads understood the arrangement perfectly. The rules were not instructions. The rules were the list of things you would be charged with if your luck ran out. Number 13. The split nap. The hours of service law did not exist in any meaningful form until 1907, and even after it, crews worked 16-hour days that started at 2 in the morning. No rule permitted sleeping on duty. Every crew slept on duty. They just organized it. On a long run, the engineer and fireman traded the watch in unofficial shifts, one man running the engine while the other slept sitting up with his arm through the armrest so he would not pitch off the seat box. In the caboose, the conductor and rear brakeman did the same, one man always in the cupola. Getting caught meant dismissal. Working 30 hours straight with no sleep meant something worse, and the men had seen it, an engineer asleep with the throttle open and a red board coming. The split nap was illegal, and honestly, it was safety policy invented by the workers because the company had none. Number 12. Letting her roll. Timetables assigned every freight train a maximum speed, and on paper, those limits were sacred. On the ground, there was an institution called making up time, downgrade. A drag that had crawled up the mountain at 12 miles an hour came down the other side at whatever speed the engineer's nerve allowed, air brakes cycling, wheels singing, speed limit, a distant memory. Old engineers ran downgrades by feel, by the sound of the flanges, by landmarks their fathers had shown them. This crossing at 40, that curve at 35, brakes full on before the water tank or you will never make the bottom. Dispatchers scheduled around the practice without ever acknowledging it, because the timetable only worked if the mountain crews stole back the minutes the mountain took. An entire national freight schedule quietly balanced on the outlawed velocity of loaded trains falling down mountains under perfect control. Number 11. Going between the cars. This is the one that killed men who did it wrong, and it killed thousands. Before the automatic coupler was mandated in 1893, cars were joined by link and pin, and the only way to couple them was for a brakeman to stand between two cars as they came together, guiding an iron link into a socket and dropping a pin through it at the exact moment of impact. Timing was everything. A misjudged step, a lurch of slack, a frozen patch of ballast underfoot, and a man lost fingers, a hand, an arm, or his life between the drawheads. Veteran brakemen were identified in every depot in America the same way, by the missing fingers. Even after automatic couplers, men kept going between moving cars to adjust knuckles and open pins, because stopping the movement cost time. The rulebooks screamed against it in capital letters. The switching pace demanded it every hour. Between 1877 and 1887, coupling accidents killed or maimed more American railroad men than any other single cause. That is the price tag on this shortcut. It ran the railroads anyway, until the law finally forced a machine to do what men had been doing with their bare hands. Number 10. Hand sanding from the pilot beam. Steam locomotives carried sand domes to drop sand on the rail for traction, and the delivery pipes clogged constantly, froze in winter, or simply missed the rail entirely. When a heavy train stalled on a wet grade with the drivers spinning, the approved answer was to wait, work the engine gently, and try again. The real answer was the fireman climbing out along the running board with a scoop or a bucket of sand from the dome, crouching over the front of a working locomotive, throwing sand under the drivers by hand while the engineer widened on her. On some roads, men rode the pilot beam itself, feet braced on the steps, sanding the rail a scoop at a time as the engine crawled. One slip meant going under your own train. It was prohibited everywhere and practiced everywhere, especially in the leaf fall of October and the ice of February, and every tonnage record set on a bad rail day owed something to a man hanging off the front of the engine, doing a machine's job by hand. Number 9. Carrying her low. The water glass told the crew how much water covered the boiler's crown sheet, and the first commandment of steam was, keep the crown sheet covered, because an uncovered crown sheet melts, and a melted crown sheet is a boiler explosion. The rulebook demanded a wide margin of water at all times. But water takes energy to heat, and a boiler carried low, with less water, made steam faster and pulled harder. Old engineers on tight schedules ran the glass lower than any inspector would have allowed, trading their margin of safety for horsepower, reading the water's bounce in the glass like a heart monitor. The dangerous moment was cresting a grade when the water sloshed forward and the level over the crown sheet dropped further still. Men who carried her low worked the injector at the summit with the timing of an organist. Get it wrong once, and the soft plugs dropped, or worse. The practice was never written down, never officially admitted, and passed from engineer to fireman in the quietest voice on the railroad. Number 8. The wooden wedge. A pounding rod bearing or a worn driving box on a steam engine was supposed to mean a shop appointment. Out on the road, 90 miles from the roundhouse, it meant the engineer got down with his torch and his overalls pockets full of persuasion. Hardwood wedges, cut from brake club stock or a split fence post, driven into the worn space with a hammer to take up the slack until the pounding quieted. Leather cut from an old glove shimming a loose wedge bolt. Sheet tin folded into a worn shoe. None of it appeared in any maintenance manual. All of it was strictly the shop's jurisdiction, and every old engineer carried the makings anyway, because an engine that failed on the road disgraced her crew. The roundhouse machinists would find the wedges weeks later, shake their heads, and say nothing. Professional courtesy between men who both knew the engine had no business finishing that trip, and finished it. Third pattern break. Now ask the question nobody asked at the time. Why did they do it? Why risk your fingers, your job, your life to save a company 30 minutes? The answer is that the railroad's rules and the railroad's pay pointed in opposite directions. Crews were paid by the trip and by the mile, not by the hour. A fast trip meant getting home, getting rested, and getting called again, and getting called again meant getting paid again. A crew that did everything by the book made fewer trips, earned less money, and was quietly marked down as slow, and slow men got the worst assignments on the railroad. The company wrote rules that demanded caution and a wage system that punished it, then acted surprised at what the men chose. The old heads were doing arithmetic. Every shortcut on this list was a calculation made by a man who had a family, a mortgage on a small house near the tracks, and a paycheck that depended on the wheels turning. Number 7. The impossible saw-by. Single-track railroading meant meets, 2 trains, 1 siding, pass carefully. But sidings were built for the trains of 1885, and by 1910, the trains had outgrown them. When 2 90-car freights met at a 60-car siding, the book had no good answer, and the crews invented one, the saw-by, a chess move performed with real trains. One train pulled into the siding until its head end hung out the far switch onto the main. The opposing train ran up, backed, waited. The first train sawed forward. The second slipped past the cleared portion, movements interleaved, switches thrown and rethrown, 2 trains threading through a space that officially could not hold them. A complicated saw-by bent half a dozen rules about occupying main track, ran entirely on hand signals and lantern swings in the dark, and took an hour of coordinated nerve. Done right, the dispatcher's sheet showed a routine meet. Done wrong, it made the newspapers. It was done right, thousands of times, by men whose names nobody wrote down. Number 6. The tobacco plug. Nearly every man on a steam railroad chewed tobacco, and the plug in his pocket was also a repair part. A weeping flue at the front sheet, a seeping stay bolt, a pinhole in an injector line, and out came the chew. A wad of well-worked tobacco pressed into a leak on a hot surface baked hard in minutes, a patch the mechanical department never sanctioned and never managed to stamp out. The stuff worked for the same reason the oatmeal worked: fibers and gum, heat cured into a gasket. Master mechanics who found the little black patches during boiler washes called it filth and wrote men up when they could prove it, which was almost never, because tobacco was everywhere and nobody had seen anything. It was the smallest shortcut on this list, and maybe the most universal. There are museum locomotives today, fully restored, whose restorers found 100-year-old tobacco patches still holding. Number 5. Getting off on the fly. The Rulebook, in bold type, forbade getting on or off moving equipment. It might as well have forbidden weather. The entire craft of the brakeman and switchman was built around mounting and dismounting moving cars, stepping off a moving footboard to throw a switch ahead of the engine, dropping off the caboose at the depot platform to register the train, while the caboose rolled onto the yard, swinging aboard the ladder of a car, accelerating past at 10 miles an hour with a lantern hooked in one elbow. There was a taut technique, feet trailing, knees bent, land walking, and old heads drilled it into new men with more care than any company class ever did, precisely because it was forbidden and therefore untrained. Officials looked away for 80 years because the alternative was stopping every movement every time a man got on or off, which would have doubled the time of every switch job in the country. The rule existed for the investigation. The stepping off existed for the railroad. Number 4. The midnight requisition. Company stores departments ran on paperwork, requisitions, approvals, days of waiting, and a road engine going out at 5 a.m. could not wait days for a headlight bulb, a gauge glass, an armful of waste, or a can of valve oil. So the railroad ran on the midnight requisition, which is the polite name for men taking what the job needed from wherever it could be found. A dead engine in the back of the roundhouse was a parts store. The car department's supply shelf had loose hinges after dark. None of it was for personal gain, and that distinction mattered enormously. A man who took a company lantern home was a thief. A man who stripped a gauge glass off a stored engine at 3 a.m. so the morning local could leave on time was a railroader solving a problem. The stores department wrote memos about shrinkage for 100 years. The trains kept leaving on time, equipped by theft from the very company they served. Number 3. Rolling the red board. Here is the shortcut so common, the rulebook rewrote itself around it. In early automatic signal territory, the rule at a stop signal on the road was exactly what it said: stop. Then, on many roads, stop and stay until the signal cleared or a flagman came back. Crews faced with a red block signal in the middle of nowhere, protecting what was usually nothing worse than a slow train somewhere far ahead, began doing the practical thing, stopping, waiting a moment, and then easing past the red board at a crawl, prepared to stop short of anything, feeling their way down the block. It was a violation everywhere, and it was so universal and so rarely harmful when done with genuine caution that the railroads eventually surrendered. Rulebooks adopted stop and proceed, letting a train halt at certain stop signals and then move at restricted speed, a formal description of what crews had been doing illegally for years. Some roads later dropped the stop entirely. The men broke the rule until the rule was rewritten to match the men. That is not a legend. You can trace it edition by edition through the old books of rules. Number 2. The private whistle codes. The official whistle signals filled a page of the rulebook: 2 longs, a short, and a long for a crossing, and so on. Beneath the official code ran an entire, unofficial language. Engineers on a division developed private signals with the operators, the section gangs, and each other. A certain playful quirk on the crossing whistle told the operator at the next station to have orders ready on the fly. A particular short told a section foreman his men had time to finish their track work before the extra showed up. Engineers signaled their own homes, a personal signature blown a mile out so a wife could put supper on the stove. Officially, unauthorized whistle signals were prohibited. They cluttered a system meant to be unambiguous, and superintendents periodically cracked down. Unofficially, the private codes moved information across the railroad faster than the telegraph, and every man on the district could name every engineer on the district blind, by ear, in the dark, from the first note. Number 1. Running ahead of the book. The number 1 banned shortcut on the American railroad was the simplest one. The trains ran faster than the rules allowed, and everyone from the newest fireman to the president of the road knew it, and the reputation of American railroading was built on it. The crack passenger schedules of the Golden Age, the mail trains making impossible connections, the fruit blocks racing perishables east before the ice melted, all were scheduled tight on paper and made time in the dark that no timetable authorized. Engineers on the fast runs were chosen precisely because they would do it. Men who knew every curve and soft spot on the district well enough to run over the legal limit night after night for 30 years. When a mail train came in on time through a storm, management sent congratulations and asked no questions. The speed limit was the rule. The schedule was the order. And when the rule and the order disagreed, every man on the railroad knew which one he had actually been hired to obey. That silent agreement, renewed every night for a century, is what kept America's trains running. So here is my challenge. Ask your family. If your grandfather railroaded, some of these stories are sitting at your dinner table right now, and they will die untold if nobody asks. Drop a comment with the shortcut that surprised you most. I want to know if the Dutch drop beats the tobacco plug, and I want to hear the stories your family still carries. Because these were not just tricks. They were the unwritten operating manual of American railroading, and the men who wrote it never got their names in the book.